All right, good morning everyone. Welcome back to the Houston Zoo. My name is Kenny. I'm one of our senior keepers in the aquarium department. And today we're going to focus on our school of red-bellied piranha. We're going to head upstairs to feed these guys here in just a moment. There's one big misconception about these guys that I'd like to touch on before we head upstairs. These guys are thought of as aggressive predators. In fact, they are more likely to be scavengers, feeding like a vulture would on non-living animals over hunting living prey. And that really does work out for these really small animals that live on the massive, vast Amazon River. So if you guys want to follow me, we're going to head on upstairs at this time to go feed our piranha. So when it comes to their diet, these guys are going to get fed capelin today. It's one of their favorite food items, one they get pretty regularly. They also get stuff like shrimp and squid. And on special occasions, they'll get stuff all the way up to the size of salmon fillet. So rather large food items for these guys as well. So again, capelin today. These guys are usually pretty energetic. Here we go. Sometimes, like us, their energy level does come and go. Some days they're more energetic than others. They are still eating. They're not quite as aggressive at the surface like they can be from time to time. But I never have to remove any food. They always eat everything for us. A neat thing about the mouth of a piranha, each of their teeth are triangular in shape, so kind of similar to like our canine teeth in our mouths, except every single one of their teeth are shaped like that. Also, when they truly close their mouth, those teeth interlock like teeth on a zipper, making these guys almost like living bear traps when it comes to closing their mouth and eating their food. They actually don't have any molars like we do, so they can't chew their food really. They just take a big bite and swallow it whole. These guys can eat a lot of food in a relatively short period of time. So I forgot to mention earlier, when we came around this way, we fed our jellyfish earlier this morning. So you might notice little tiny bits and pieces of stuff in the water. This water should be crystal clear right now. We fed these guys their normal diet, which is small plankton called Artemia. We have a little beaker of it here just so you can see up close. These guys are also known as like sea monkeys. They grow up here at the Houston Zoo. They are actually 2-day old. So 48 hours old, little tiny individual plankton. The jellyfish absolutely love it. To kind of give you an idea on how a jellyfish eats, every single time they pulse, they are actually actively feeding. So you'll notice those tiny little hair-like tentacles that live or kind of grow around the edge of the jelly body. Those kind of help sift that food in towards the center where those kind of clover leaf stomachs are. There's actually 4 stomachs within these jellyfish. There are some abnormalities where you may see a few more stomachs than that, but the typical one's going to have 4 stomachs. Attached to every single one of those stomachs are a ribbon-like oral arm. So each of those little tentacles, again, the tiny hair-like appendages, are sifting that food in towards those oral arms. The oral arms pulls it up into the stomachs. Again, those are the horseshoe-shaped parts in the center of the jelly. They will process all of their food in those stomachs. They will then release it back, and what looks like little tiny cotton balls is actually jellyfish waste. That will get released back into the water, and it'll be picked up by our filtration system. So it's absolutely fascinating how delicate and simple these little animals are, but yet how incredible they really are when it comes to their makeup, because they're essentially just a specialized nerve net of that pulses. So the jellyfish is going to be constantly pulsing, so they're actually actively feeding again at all times. I want to welcome viewers again. My name is Kenny. We are here in the Natural Encounters building. We just finished feeding our red-bellied piranha. We'll be answering questions in front of that exhibit here momentarily, but we are currently looking at our moon jelly exhibit in Natural Encounters. Feel free to ask questions away. We'll be answering your questions here momentarily. These guys get fed twice a day. Kind of a neat thing to know about these jellyfish is they actually are not only here in front of us, but they also are kind of born and raised here at the Houston Zoo. The jellyfish start their lives in a polyp form, which is a sedentary kind of little tiny, looks almost like a little tiny coral animal. They start to strobilate when conditions get perfect, and that just simply means it starts to pulse. That little polyp starts to pulse, and as the conditions again are perfect, those little tiny strobilating polyps will pop off what we call a phyra, which are tiny little animals that grow into these Medusa-sized jellyfish. They're about the size of a pin dot when they first are born. Kinsey asked a great question: what eats jellyfish? Funny enough, sea turtles will. Sea turtles will eat jellyfish, and that is a great segue into why it is important to reduce our plastics, because if you were to have a container of clear plastic bags in a container of water, and then you had a few jellyfish in a container of water right next to each other, for a poor sea turtle, it's very much the same, it looks like. So if you have a jellyfish that's very much food for the sea turtle, that's great. If they end up eating plastic, obviously that is not very good. So it's great to reduce our plastic use, especially single-use bags. Those are very bad. Sophia asks, can they glow? These guys don't necessarily glow. They have a little bit of a opaqueness to them, so they're almost see-through, but not quite. We do have some that benefit from sunlight. The mastigious, or the blue spotted lagoon jellyfish, those guys have symbiotic bacteria that live within them to benefit from the light. There are some species like ctenophores that may, kind of like comb jellies, those guys may have a little bit of bioluminescence, but these guys do not. Great questions, y'all. Keep them coming. These guys in front of us are roughly about 2 to 3 months old. Issa asks, why are they called moon jellies? These guys are called moon jellies because they tend to be seen up at the surface pretty often, and they look kind of like the moon in a way. That's kind of a simplistic answer for that. But yeah, they're big. They're very much a common species of jellyfish. These guys are found all over our oceans. I want to say happy birthday to Levi, and the question he has is, do they come in different colors? These jellyfish don't. These guys tend to stay this color their whole lives. The only time they kind of change color is actually when they have food in their bodies. So you might see if the light hits them right, they may look a little bit pinkish, almost orange in color. That's simply because of the artemia these guys are eating. Normally though, they're going to look kind of that almost clear, more opaque, light bluish color. Great question. And like I mentioned, we do culture not only the artemia, like I mentioned, it's 2 days old. We get them in cysts. Little artemia have the really neat ability to not only lay eggs when it's dry, and they can actually dry out the eggs without injuring the small artemia inside. They can also lay eggs with a soft membrane, like they're laying eggs in water, which is very neat. Lauren asks, how long do they live? Another great question. So polyp-formed jellyfish can theoretically live forever as long as they are in proper water quality and conditions, because those little polyps will create different jellyfish. Now, a single jellyfish like we see in front of us, the actual Medusa free swimming jelly, those guys live for about 12 months to maybe a year and a half. So relatively short lifespans for the Medusa free swimming jellyfish. Now we're gonna head back out to the front of the piranha exhibit and see what these guys are doing after they're feeding. They were a little bit more calm while we fed. Again, that's pretty normal for these guys. Some days they're really gung-ho, splashing heavily. Some days it's not quite that much. And today was kind of more on that not so much side of things. A little bit more calm, cool, and collected. But again, they almost never leave anything of magnitude behind. And they did a great job today. We can see in front of us there is virtually nothing but a nice light haze throughout the exhibit. All the oils and all the leftover small little bits and pieces you may see resting on the tunnel of the exhibit. But other than that, they ate really well for us today. Ate every bit of it, leaving nothing behind. A bunch of full bellies in our little piranha. These guys have stomachs that are about the size of a golf ball. So individually, a little bit of food really goes a long way. When you incorporate our rather vast school, they will eat about 1.5 pounds of food on a given day. James asks, can they jump out of water? They do a little bit, not quite as much as what films and shows will portray. They do splash a little bit, so if you look at the glass after a feeding, normally the glass above the water is bone dry. Occasionally it'll get wet from them splashing. They don't do much more than splash at the surface. They don't usually fully jump out of the water like you might think from movies and shows. One neat thing about these guys is it is hard to tell a boy from a girl. They look pretty much the same. The only time to really catch that difference is during a breeding season itself. These guys tend to breed when the kind of monsoon season rolls in on the Amazon River. The river floods its banks. Trees fall down. They're able to use exposed root systems and down shrubbery to help kind of protect the babies. So when they lay their eggs in those exposed root systems in the flooded forest, those babies will be able to grow up for about a month or two and then make their way safely back out to the ocean. And they'll turn different colors. The males usually turn a very dark coloration, and they're actually the ones that initiate the breeding process. So right now they're not in a breeding type of activity, so it is virtually impossible to point out a male from a female in our school. Melinda asks, could they eat each other? Now, these guys are usually living with the mentality of safety in numbers. As a scavenger, these guys tend to come across food pretty regularly on the Amazon River. Animals, it's a very vast river, so animals are being born and passing away quite regularly. So these guys usually have food pretty much at their beck and call whenever they want. That being said, after a feeding, you may not start to notice they're a little bit more skittish. They may be a little bit more energetic towards one another, which leads to some chasing. Occasionally they'll bite each other, which is usually very minor, superficial type of thing. So it's not something major. So fully like eating each other, quote unquote, is pretty unlikely. These guys tend to just kind of give each other a little bit of love bites here and there from time to time. Paula asks, how hard is a bite? That is a great question. I don't know for certain what their bite force is on these guys. I can safely assume it's pretty darn strong because they are able to bite through whole fish, like the capelin we just fed have bone in them. And they were able to bite through that almost like a warm knife cutting through a stick of butter. So it seems pretty effortless. So they do have extremely powerful jaws. That is something that really works to their advantage alongside those sharp teeth, because like I mentioned, they're almost like a living bear trap. And when you think of a bear trap, whatever those teeth on a bear trap hit, that's what's going to go with it. Same with these guys. Those strong, powerful jaws will make pretty quick use of any food items. Jennifer asks, how long can they live? Our school of red-bellied piranha are about 13, maybe just shy of 14 years old. on the Amazon River. In general, these guys would be considered older, mature red-bellied piranha. Some institutions may have them upwards of just shy of 20 years, give or take. Luckily, these guys have the opportunity to see our vet staff if they do ever come down with some kind of sickness, or if they end up getting a scratch that needs to be looked at by our veterinary team. We have the ability to do so and have done so successfully. So these guys can live for quite a few more years. And again, they're eating really well, their body shape is great, and their appetite is obviously perfect too. So, and similar type of thing on the Amazon River, those small little injuries or scratches or a sickness can end pretty badly for those guys. So the average lifespan may be in their early teens. It's kind of hard to estimate, but it may not be as long as what we're able to do, considering we can again give these guys veterinary care as need be. Cheryl asks, how fast can they swim? In general, these guys are going to cruise the river kind of nice and easy. Again, as a scavenger, they're going to try and be opportunistic. If they come across food, they're going to try and eat every single time they come across it. So they're going to, instead of going really fast down the river, they're going to cruise nice and easy. So in general, what we see in front of us right now, that's probably their average speed. So nice and slow and steady. When they come across food, though, they eat really, really fast in that feeding frenzy. And I want to explain really fast why that is. So these guys are going to cruise the river, and I like to think of them almost like a security system. You have a big school of piranha, potentially 100 or more on a very large school. Each individual piranha has a lateral line that goes down the side of their body that allows sense of motion, even if they don't see it. It's a little tiny pitting that goes along the side of their body. So if one individual piranha sees something that scares them, they will hightail it to safety, and that'll get everyone else's attention to do the same. Now, if they're coming across food, it's almost like that security system goes offline temporarily, and they're going to all focus on those food items. If they were to feed really slowly, that's going to leave them at a slightly disadvantaged state, where an animal that might be hiding nearby that's bold enough to attack might sneak up onto the school. So feeding in a frenzy allows these guys to kind of protect themselves. So when they feed is actually when they're at their fastest. Outside of that, they're going to try and calmly move up and down the river to make sure they're not going to miss any food, and also make sure they don't sneak up or kind of hurry up onto a nearby predator that could be hiding around these guys. Charisse asks, do they have predators? Great question. You guys are asking some really good questions today. So with these guys in a school of piranha, more than likely they're pretty safe. The only big disadvantage would be during maybe a drought. If these guys get kind of on a little pool secluded off of the Amazon River, they may be at a pretty big disadvantage to any large bird or animal that lives on land that may predate upon a school of piranha in a little area of the river, if they're kind of stuck off the main part of the river. Now, when they're very young, so roughly the size of a rice grain, give or take, they are predated upon by not only insects, like other larval fish, birds, all types of things. So these guys have a very low survival rate when they're babies, and that kind of mentality sticks with these guys. So anything bigger than them, they are very much skittish, where explains also why, if you happen to come here and you've been to one of my keeper chats in the past, you may notice that we close the tunnel off, and that's simply to make sure these guys don't get scared while they eat, because they are very much, that's kind of an instilled thought process. But when it comes to these full-size guys, they're pretty safe for the most part. Lindsay asks, where are they found in the wild? Another great question. These guys live on the Amazon River. These guys are South American Amazon fish. They're very common. We do have a cousin of these guys called or actually I guess a separate species of these guys called the yellow-bellied piranha, also here at the Houston Zoo. Those are the largest species of piranha. The red bellies we have in front of us are considered your most common, and very much the ones more likely to be portrayed in shows and films. All right, guys, I want to thank you all so very much for joining me today. It's been a blast. I want to make sure I mention that we miss having everybody here visiting the zoo. In the meantime, all of us staff are still working hard behind the scenes to make sure that all of our animals are getting the proper amount of nutrition, everything's being covered while y'all are away. And to help out with that, if you're very much interested, I want to bring up the Emergency Relief Fund that the Houston Zoo has set up. For more information about that, you can find that on the houstonzoo.org webpage. And Also, we'll be having another Facebook Live post tomorrow, live video at 11 a.m. Stick around and join us tomorrow for that. And again, thank you so very much for letting me join you today.